In the year 165, a young samurai named Akio ruined his entire life in just 3 seconds. 3 seconds of anger he couldn't control. That was all it took. His good name vanished. His position was taken away. His honor was broken in front of everyone who mattered to him. And here's the part that hurts the most. You might be doing the same thing every single day, reacting without thinking, blowing up before taking a breath, damaging relationships, destroying chances, all because no one ever showed you what the samurai understood about self-control. But there is a way, a method built on 3 ideas that turn wild reactions into calm, chosen actions. Ancient warriors called it the unshakable mind. By the time this ends, you'll understand exactly how it works. Akio stood in the training yard of Lord Hidetaka's compound, his hands shaking. Not from fear, from anger that still burned inside him. He was 23 years old, young but respected. A skilled samurai serving Lord Hidetaka. 6 years of hard training. Perfect technique. Natural talent that older warriors quietly envied. None of it mattered anymore. In front of him, the practice dummy was destroyed. Not cut, not damaged. Shattered into splinters scattered across the ground. Akio's sword was buried deep into the wooden post behind it. 10 steps away stood Kenji, the weapons master. Blood ran down the side of his face where a sharp piece of wood had struck him. You could have killed him. Lord Hidetaka's voice broke the silence. Cold, firm, final. Akio tried to speak, but no words came out. The anger that had felt right only moments ago now sat heavy in his stomach, like poison. It had started simply. During practice, Kenji corrected Akio's stance. He said Akio was holding too much tension. He told him to relax. Something inside Akio snapped. Too tense? He shouted, "I train harder than anyone here." The words burst out before he could stop them. Then his body moved on its own. 12 strikes. One after another. Not training. Pure rage. He didn't notice Kenji stepping closer to observe. Didn't see the other students backing away. Didn't feel the moment when a thin piece of wood flew through the air. He only saw the damage when it was over. The dummy destroyed. Kenji holding his bleeding head. Everyone staring at Akio with shock and quiet pity. Lord Hidetaka stepped forward. "You have talent," he said. "But a samurai who cannot control himself is more dangerous to his own clan than to any enemy." He paused. "You are removed from service." Effective immediately. In that moment, Akio's world collapsed. His father had died 2 years earlier. His mother depended on the rice he earned. His younger sister's future marriage depended on his position. All of it was gone. Not because he lacked skill. Not because he lacked effort. But because he lost control. That night, Akio sat alone inside his family's small home. The room felt tighter than before, as if the walls had moved closer. His mother had cried softly before going to sleep. She tried to hide it, but he heard her anyway. Each quiet sob felt heavier than any punishment Lord Hidetaka could give. His younger sister didn't say a single word to him. She passed by without looking at his face. That silence hurt more than anger ever could. Akio sat with his back against the wall, staring at the floor. The shame felt real, almost physical, like stones pressing down inside his chest. His thoughts kept circling back to the same moment. Over and over again. If he had paused, if he had taken one breath, if he had waited just 3 seconds before reacting. 3 seconds, that was all it would have taken. But he didn't have those seconds. There was no space between what he felt and what he did. Kenji's words hit him, and his body moved right away. No choice, no pause, no control, just reaction. Akio had always been like this. Quick to anger, fast to explode. His father had warned him when he was younger. His teachers had mentioned it during training. But he never thought it truly mattered. He worked harder than everyone else. He trained longer than everyone else. Wasn't that enough? Clearly it wasn't. Now everything depended on him, and he had failed. The rice his mother relied on was gone. The future his sister hoped for was slipping away. All because he couldn't stop himself for a few seconds. As the night dragged on, sleep never came. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the broken dummy. He saw blood on Kenji's face. He heard Lord Hidetaka's voice delivering judgment. Near dawn, Akio stood up quietly and stepped outside. The cool air touched his skin, but it didn't calm his mind. He walked toward the river at the edge of town. The water flowed steadily, moving around rocks without fighting them. It never stopped. It never exploded. Akio watched it for a long time. Somewhere deep inside, a question began to form. What if the problem wasn't anger itself? What if the real problem was that he had no space between feeling and action? He didn't have answers yet. But for the first time since his dismissal, something shifted. Not hope, not relief, just the smallest opening. Akio stood at the river's edge as the sky slowly brightened. The water moved without effort, sliding around stones in its path. It didn't push back. It didn't stop. It simply kept going. He watched the current for a long time. The river never burst forward in anger. It never fought the rocks. It adjusted and passed them by. Water doesn't explode. The voice came from behind him. Akio turned. An older samurai stood a short distance away. He looked to be around 60 years old. Gray hair was tied neatly back. His clothes were plain, worn from years of use. Yet something about him felt powerful. Not loud, not threatening. Still, his presence filled the space. "I saw what happened yesterday," the man said calmly. "You destroyed a practice dummy and your own life." Akio lowered his head. "You came to remind me of my shame." The older samurai shook his head. "No, I came to offer you a choice." Akio looked up, confused. "What choice?" "I have nothing left." The man smiled slightly. "You have everything left," he said. "You just don't know how to reach it yet." Akio frowned. "My anger ruined me." The man stepped closer to the river. "Anger isn't your real problem," he said. "The problem is that there's no space between what you feel and what you do." He pointed gently toward Akio's chest. "You don't experience anger," he continued. "You become it. That's why it controls you." Akio felt the words land deep inside him. "Who are you?" he asked. "My name is Misato," the man replied. "I was once the same as you, quick to anger, pulled around by every emotion." Misato looked back at the river. "Then I learned 3 principles that changed everything," he said. "They can change you too, if you're willing." Akio hesitated. "What principles?" Misato spoke the names slowly. Mushin, Ma, Wabi-Sabi. The words meant nothing to Akio, but Misato's eyes held something he had never seen before. Peace. A deep, steady calm. "Will you teach me?" Akio asked. Misato studied him in silence. Then he nodded. "Meet me at the old dojo on the North Road," he said. "Tomorrow at dawn. Bring nothing except your willingness to see yourself clearly." Misato turned to leave, then paused. "And Akio," he added without looking back, "you won't like what you discover, but it's the only path forward." Misato walked away, leaving Akio by the river. For the first time since everything fell apart, Akio didn't feel trapped. He didn't feel fixed, but he felt a door had opened. Dawn arrived cold and quiet. Akio stood outside the old dojo on the North Road. The building looked forgotten. Weathered wood, cracked walls. Nothing special at all. Inside, the air smelled of dust and age. Misato sat on the floor in front of a small altar. A single candle burned, its flame steady and still. "Sit," Misato said without turning around. Akio lowered himself to the floor. His legs protested almost immediately. Misato didn't move. Minutes passed. Then more. Akio's mind began to race. "This is pointless. My family needs food. Why am I sitting here doing nothing? I should be fixing my mistakes." His thoughts piled on top of each other, each one louder than the last. Masato finally spoke. "Your mind is shouting, isn't it?" Akio exhaled. "Yes." Masato turned and faced him. "Good," he said. "That means you're ready." He leaned forward slightly. "The first principle is called Mushin," Masato explained. "It means no mind or empty mind. Not because you have no thoughts, but because your thoughts no longer control you." Akio frowned, trying to understand. "Right now," Masato continued, "every thought becomes who you are. If you think, 'I am angry,' you are angry. There is no distance between you and the thought." Masato picked up a small cherry blossom petal. He placed it gently on the surface of a bowl filled with water. "Watch," he said. The petal rested on the water. It floated easily. The water held it but did not grab it. "Your mind should be like this," Masato said. "Thoughts land on your awareness. You see them, but you don't cling to them. You don't become them." Akio stared at the petal. "So I shouldn't fight my thoughts?" he asked. Masato shook his head. "No, fighting only makes them stronger," he said. "You observe them. That's all." Akio closed his eyes again. Thoughts rushed in immediately. Worry, regret, anger, fear. Instead of pushing them away, he watched them pass. One thought followed another, like leaves drifting down a stream. For a brief moment, just a few seconds, there was nothing. No thoughts, no noise, only awareness. Akio opened his eyes slowly. "That's silence," Masato said quietly. "That is the beginning of Mushin." Akio felt it fade quickly. The thoughts returned, but something had changed. For the first time, he understood that his thoughts were not him. They were just passing through, and that meant they didn't have to rule him. Masato stood and picked up 2 wooden practice swords. He handed one to Akio. "Stand," he said. Akio rose to his feet, still feeling the calm from moments earlier. Masato faced him, relaxed but alert. "I'm going to strike you," Masato said. Slowly at first. Masato lifted his sword and swung. Akio blocked without thinking. His body moved on its own. Masato nodded. "Did you notice something?" he asked. Akio shook his head. Masato stepped closer. "There was a moment," he said. "Very small but real. A space between seeing my sword move and your body reacting." He raised his sword again and struck faster. Akio barely managed to block this time. "That space," Masato said, "is called Ma." Akio listened closely. "It is the interval," Masato continued. "The gap between what happens and what you do next. Between stimulus and response." Masato circled him slowly. "Ma exists everywhere," he said. "Between inhale and exhale. Between sound and understanding. Between insult and reaction." Akio felt something begin to shift inside his chest. "Most people never notice this space," Masato said. "So they live as prisoners of reaction." Masato stopped in front of him. "Yesterday, Kenji criticized you," he said. "That was the stimulus. Your explosion was the response." Masato tapped the space between them with his sword. "But Ma was there," he said. "You just never learned how to see it." Akio's eyes widened. "So if I can find this space," he said slowly, "I can choose what I do next." Masato smiled. "Yes," he said. "That is real self-control." He lowered his sword. "Self-control is not crushing emotion," Masato continued. "It is creating space around emotion." Akio thought back to the training yard. To the insult. To the instant his body moved without permission. There had been no pause. No breath. No choice. Just action. For the first time, Akio said quietly, "I understand what was missing." Masato nodded. "When stimulus leads straight to response," he said, "there is no freedom, only habit." He stepped back. "But when you learn to step into Ma," Masato continued, "even for one breath, you reclaim choice." Akio closed his eyes and took a slow breath. In that breath, he felt something new. Space. Not empty, not weak, alive. And in that space, he sensed the beginning of control, not over others, but over himself. Masato watched him closely. "This," he said, "is where practice begins." Masato led Akio into a quiet room. On a low table sat a simple clay bowl. Its rim was chipped. A small crack ran across the side. Akio frowned. "Why would you show me a broken bowl?" he asked. Masato smiled softly. "Look carefully," he said. "Notice how it still holds water." Akio leaned closer. He could see the imperfections clearly, yet it was still useful, still beautiful in its own way. "Most people chase perfection," Masato said. "They demand flawlessness, from others, from the world, from themselves." He picked up the bowl gently. "See this crack? It is not a failure. It is honesty. It shows what has been endured." Akio's chest tightened. He thought of the training yard. The insult. The sudden rage. Perfection had been the hidden spark, Masato explained. Expecting everything to go exactly as imagined. That was what set off the explosion in him. "The bowl does not resist its shape," Masato said. "It accepts what is. It works with what it has. This is called Wabi-Sabi." He put the bowl back on the table. "Your anger, your reactions, they are like this bowl. Cracked, imperfect, and human. You cannot destroy them. You can only notice them, accept them, and act." Akio's mind opened slightly, as if a door had been pushed ajar. "Wabi-Sabi teaches patience," Masato continued. "Acceptance removes fuel. The fire is no longer fed by expectation." He gestured to the earlier lessons. Mushin clears the mind. Ma creates the space. And Wabi-Sabi dissolves the judgment. Together, they are complete. Akio imagined that moment in the yard again. The insult, the strike, the shame. He could see it now through a different lens. Instead of rage, there was observation. Instead of shame, there was awareness. Instead of punishment, there was learning. Daily practice, Masato said, makes these principles real. Not just in training, not just in swords, but in every moment you breathe, speak, or act. Akio nodded slowly. He reached out and ran his fingers along the rim of the bowl. Its crack was still there, but it no longer felt wrong. It was complete in its own way. Masato observed quietly. "This," he said, "is where philosophy enters life, where insight becomes habit." Akio rose early each morning. 3 routines filled his day: sitting in stillness, measuring the space between movements, and noticing imperfections in small things. Masato had said they were simple, but not easy. Each practice tested his patience, discipline, and attention. The first days were heavy. His mind jumped from one thought to another. Every distraction felt enormous. Even when he tried to focus, frustration bubbled under the surface. He wanted progress, but each session left him feeling clumsy and weak. In the courtyard, he swung the wooden sword over and over. Timing was off. The space between his moves seemed invisible. He hit too early or too late. Each mistake felt like proof that he would never improve. Still, Masato's lessons echoed in his mind. Breathe, observe, accept. Even as he stumbled, Akio tried to see each error clearly, without anger. At the market, he tested what he had learned. A merchant's cart blocked a narrow path, and Akio needed to pass. He paused. He remembered the space between stimulus and response. He moved smoothly around the cart without bumping anything. For a moment, a small spark of pride warmed him. He had done it right. But that spark faded quickly. Later, in a narrow street, a drunk man shoved him roughly. Instinct surged, and Akio's hand reacted before his mind could catch up. He swung, missing entirely. His foot caught a stone and he nearly fell. The man laughed, staggering away, leaving Akio's face burning with shame. He clenched his fists and stepped back. The day's small victory seemed meaningless next to this failure. He replayed the scene in his mind, wondering why he had lost control so easily. Misato's words returned gently, like a quiet tide. Progress is uneven. Growth comes in waves, not leaps. You will falter before you stand. Akio exhaled. He realized that learning was not a straight line. The 3 principles were not magic, they were tools. He had to practice relentlessly, stumble, and try again. Even the smallest success mattered, and even the largest failure was a lesson. By nightfall, his hands ached, his muscles burned, and his mind was weary. Yet there was a new edge of determination. He understood that mastery would be slow. Every misstep was a signal. Keep moving, observe, adjust. For the first time, Akio welcomed the struggle. Not because it was easy, but because it was the only way forward. The morning sun hit the dojo floor, painting sharp lines across the wooden boards. Akio faced his sparring partner, a skilled student known for quick strikes. The match was meant to be controlled, a test of timing and awareness. At first, everything seemed ordinary. Then a sudden lunge from his opponent caught him off guard. Pain shot through Akio's arm, a small cut, but enough to ignite the old surge of rage. His teeth clenched, fists tightened, and the familiar urge to lash out grew stronger. For a heartbeat, everything felt like it could explode. He could almost hear the 3-second warning ringing in his mind. But then he remembered Misato's lessons. The space between stimulus and response, the ma. He drew in a deep breath, letting the instinct pass through him like water over stones. Instead of striking back recklessly, he stepped aside, observing his opponent's motion. He waited, watching the opening, letting calm guide his reaction. When he finally moved, it was precise and deliberate. The blow landed lightly, enough to mark the exchange but not to harm. The dojo fell silent for a moment. Even his partner froze, startled by the unexpected control. Misato stood nearby, arms folded, eyes calm but sharp. A small nod of approval flickered across his face. "You are learning," Misato said, quiet but firm. "Not through force, but through presence. You see the moment without letting it consume you." Akio's chest heaved, sweat dripping down his temples. He could feel the tension slowly releasing from his shoulders, the tight coil of anger loosening. It was exhausting, but it carried a strange satisfaction. For the first time in months, he realized he wasn't just practicing principles. He was living them. The pause, the observation, the measured response, they weren't abstract ideas anymore. And yet, a small spark of humility remained. He knew this was only the beginning. The mind still raced, the body still reacted too quickly at times. Mastery wasn't a single victory, it was each moment of choice made again and again. Akio bowed to his partner, gratitude and respect in his eyes. Misato's gaze lingered on him, approving but patient. The lesson had been tested in real time, under pressure, and it had held. The principles worked, but only if he remembered them, breathed through them, and let them guide every reaction. For the first time, Akio understood what it meant to control not just the body, but the mind behind it. After the dojo's sparring ended, Misato motioned for Akio to sit. The afternoon light spilled across the wooden floor, calm after the morning tension. "Your body reacts quickly," Misato began, "but your mind can learn to guide it." He traced a slow line in the air with his finger, illustrating the path of action and thought. "The amygdala triggers the fight or flight," Misato explained. "That's your instant, emotional response. It's fast, and it doesn't care about consequences." He paused, letting the words sink in. This is why rage can feel uncontrollable. The body reacts before the mind even notices. Akio nodded, trying to quiet the nervous energy in his chest. "But there is another voice," Misato continued. "Call it the wise mind, the rational part that observes, calculates, and decides. When you pause, even for a second, you give that part of the brain room to act." Misato leaned back, eyes narrowing as if recalling something far away. "Marcus Aurelius wrote that we are disturbed not by events, but by our judgments of them. When we act without reflection, we become prisoners of our own anger. Akio remembered the cracked bowl lesson, the acceptance of imperfection, the release of emotional fuel. And Masato added quietly, didn't strike first out of impulse. He waited, measured, and observed. The sword is an extension of the mind. Control your mind, and the blade will follow. Akio let the words settle. He could feel the pattern forming, a map linking philosophy to action, thought to movement. The principles were not just abstract concepts. They were the brain's natural mechanisms explained in terms he could understand. Masato's voice softened, almost a whisper. You must embody this. Knowledge alone is empty. Understanding must become practice, habit, instinct. Akio exhaled slowly, imagining the amygdala and wise mind as two currents in his body. One surged forward, one guided with calm. He could sense the connection, the reason behind every pause, every measured response, every controlled strike. This was more than technique. It was the science of presence, the strategy of the warrior, and the philosophy of human thought rolled into one. For the first time, Akio understood why Masato insisted on both theory and practice. The lesson was clear. Mastery began in the mind, and the body would follow naturally. Akio walked back into the Lord's compound, the polished stones cool beneath his feet. Whispers floated through the air, subtle but unmistakable, and eyes followed him like silent questions. He felt the weight of yesterday's mistakes settle over his shoulders, a familiar sting of shame. The same courtyard where anger had made him collapse in front of everyone now felt charged with expectation. Nakamura stood near the training gate, arms crossed, his gaze steady and unflinching. Akio's stomach tightened. The words he had rehearsed over and over seemed fragile in his mind, but he stepped forward anyway. I owe you an apology, Akio said, voice low but steady. Nakamura's eyes didn't soften, yet they didn't harden either. They simply watched, measuring the honesty behind the words. Akio bowed deeply, letting the gesture carry all the weight of regret, humility, and acknowledgement. There was no excuse, no deflection, only ownership. It felt like the first true breath he had taken since the accident, a release he hadn't realized he was holding in. The surrounding courtiers murmured quietly, the tension in the courtyard palpable. Some glanced at each other, unsure what to make of this shift. Akio could feel their stares, yet for the first time, they didn't feel like weapons. They were witnesses, waiting to see if change was possible. Nakamura's face remained unreadable for a long moment, and Akio braced himself for dismissal, ridicule, or worse. Then, slowly a nod. Just a simple nod, but it carried acknowledgement, the faintest trace of respect reclaimed. Akio straightened, exhaling as if the air itself had been thick with shame moments before. He had faced the very public judgment he feared, and it no longer had power to destabilize him. The incident that once defined him now existed as a memory he could meet without flinching. The courtyard felt lighter, the whispering softer, the eyes less sharp. It wasn't adoration or applause, it wasn't meant to be, but it was proof that restraint, patience, and inner mastery could ripple outward, affecting the world around him. Akio walked past the gates, head high, heart steady. He had regained quiet respect, not by forcing it, but by showing the change within himself. This moment marked the bridge from internal understanding to outward proof, a demonstration that the lessons of the mind could shape actions in the world. Akio arrived at the temple high in the mountains, the wind sharp against his face and the air thin with cold. The wooden floors creaked underfoot, and the stone walls seemed to hum with centuries of quiet discipline. He was given a simple room, nearly empty, just a tatami mat, a small basin, and a low shelf. No distractions, no comforts, only the sound of his own breath and the occasional distant call of a bird. The monks led him to the meditation hall, where sunlight spilled in through narrow windows. Zazen positions were explained again, though Akio had practiced before. He knelt, crossed his legs, and tried to quiet his mind. At first, it was impossible. Thoughts came in relentless waves. The courtyard failure, Nakamura's eyes, the shame of the public apology. Anger, regret, self-doubt, each one collided with the next, louder and sharper than the wind outside. Every muscle resisted. Every breath felt jagged. Hours passed, yet Akio remained restless. The silence of the temple amplified every mistake he had made, every moment he had lost control. He felt smaller, exposed, as though the mountain itself was judging him. Then, as dusk painted the hall in soft amber, something shifted. Instead of fighting each thought, he simply observed. The anger that had once driven him flared, then subsided. The shame that had once crushed him softened. His breath found rhythm. His mind, though not empty, no longer clung to the turbulence. For the first time, Akio touched the state Masato had described, deep Mushin. He was fully present, not reacting, not resisting, simply being. The mountain, the cold, the silence, all of it felt like part of a larger flow he could inhabit without judgment. A clarity settled over him, quiet but profound. He understood that mastery was not control over the world or over others, but over his own mind. Shame still existed, but it no longer ruled him. Anger still arose, but it no longer defined his actions. Night fell, and the hall glowed with candlelight. Akio remained in place, unmoved by hunger or fatigue. He had entered the mountain carrying a fractured self and emerged aligned, centered, ready for whatever awaited beyond these walls. This isolation had stripped him bare, and in that emptiness, he had discovered strength. It was the calm before the ultimate test, the inner stillness that could now be measured against the harshest challenge. The sun had barely risen when Akio faced Yoshida in the open training yard. The villagers had gathered quietly, sensing that something extraordinary was about to unfold. Yoshida's eyes were hard, filled with expectation and a hint of anger. He wanted a fight, a display of dominance. Akio bowed, his movements calm, deliberate. There was no rush, no surge of aggression, just a steady presence that seemed to widen the space around him. Yoshida struck first, fast and precise, a blur of steel aimed at Akio's side. Each attack carried weight, each swing a test of speed and timing. But Akio did not lunge, block, or counter in the usual way. He simply moved with the flow, shifting minutely, creating gaps Yoshida couldn't perceive. With each strike, Akio's awareness deepened. He noticed tension in Yoshida's shoulders, hesitation in his step, the tiny tells that betrayed intent. Instead of meeting force with force, he guided the energy aside, letting it pass like water around a stone. The crowd watched breathless. It looked as though nothing was happening, yet every motion held purpose. Akio's presence alone was shaping the duel, turning aggression into rhythm, anger into pause. Yoshida's attacks grew more desperate, more violent, but Akio remained centered. The moment came when Yoshida lunged with everything he had. Akio stepped lightly, positioning himself so that Yoshida's momentum carried him forward harmlessly. Yoshida stumbled, off balance, and for a brief instant, everything froze. Then Akio bowed, signaling the end. No final strike, no blood drawn, no defeat imposed, yet the victory was undeniable. Yoshida's chest heaved. He looked at Akio with disbelief, then a grudging respect. Akio's heart was steady, his mind clear. He had won not by overpowering, but by embodying the principles of Mushin, Ma, and Wabi-Sabi. The lesson was visible to all. Mastery was not in force, but in presence, awareness, and timing. The crowd erupted softly, not with cheers for violence, but with awe for control. Akio's purpose had been proven. The path he had walked through shame, isolation, and relentless training had led to this moment. A victory without harm, a demonstration of inner mastery made real. He stepped back, shoulders relaxed, ready to carry this calm into every future challenge. Years had passed since the duel with Yoshida, yet Akio's presence in the village remained unmistakable. The dojo was alive with movement, the soft clang of wooden swords, and the quiet murmur of focused students. Each day, Akio guided them, not just in technique, but in awareness, patience, and calm resolve. He watched a young student hesitate before striking, their breath quick with tension. Akio stepped closer, offering a gentle correction, a subtle shift of the body, and a soft word. The student's motion became smoother, more deliberate, and for a moment, the dojo was still with shared understanding. In a quiet corner, Masato appeared, older now, hair streaked with silver, eyes calm and knowing. He observed Akio teaching, nodding in approval, and silently acknowledged the journey that had led here. Later, the two sat together beside the river, the same one where lessons had begun so many years ago. Masato asked nothing, simply watched the water flow, and Akio finally spoke. "I see now," he said, "that mastery isn't about defeating others, or even controlling myself completely. It's about presence, timing, and allowing life to move through me without resistance." Masato's lips curved in a subtle smile. "You have walked the path, Akio. You teach not by words alone, but by example. The truth you carry is simple, yet impossible to ignore." Back in the dojo, Akio turned to his students once more. He moved among them with patience, guiding hands, correcting posture, offering quiet encouragement. Each strike, each pause, each breath was a living lesson, a reflection of the principles he had fought so hard to embody. The final lesson was not announced, not dramatic, but it was felt. Mushin, Ma, and Wabi-Sabi were no longer abstract ideas. They were alive in the movements of every student, in the stillness between breaths, in the respect shared across the room. As Akio bowed to them at the end of practice, he understood that the journey had come full circle. The lessons of shame, struggle, and triumph were no longer his alone. They were now a legacy. And in that quiet, steady rhythm of teaching and learning, the core truth remained. Mastery is not a destination, but a life lived with awareness, patience, and presence. The path continues, in him, in his students, and in every moment where calm meets action.